Well, it has finally happened out in California, over a decade in the making, as oil has begun to flow from a controversial California pipeline system for the first time in more than a decade following a Trump administration order, despite state officials decrying the move.
A spokesperson for the Energy Department stated California once supplied nearly 40% of U.S. oil production, but decades of radical state policies targeting reliable energy sources have driven a decline in domestic output, while fuel demand remains among the highest in the nation.
Well, Mike, we're talking about 50,000 barrels of new oil coming online, and that is enough to provide fuel for hundreds of thousands of vehicles. Now, California hasn't built a new well since 1969 when they banned offshore drilling.
We are saying in one collective voice, stay the hell away from California's coast.
This month, the Trump administration invoked emergency powers under the Defense Production Act to allow new leases for offshore drilling, citing skyrocketing fuel prices during the Iran conflict. The proposed National Outer Continental Shelf Oil and Gas Leasing Program would last until 2031 and identifies 34 potential new lease sites, with 6 of them off the California coast and 3 in Southern California, but we're not specific on where.
So California and its environmental nonsense. You've got gas prices absolutely spiking, in part due to the Iran conflict, the Iran war, but more importantly, because California has restricted the ability of refineries to do what they need to do to provide an adequate amount of fuel to power not only California, but the West Coast, and specifically West Coast defense. So Trump basically said, hey, an easy fix here is let's get that refinery off Santa Barbara's beaches going. Let's get that going, because that's an easy way. It had a little spill, what, a decade ago or so? And that has been used in an executive order to basically say, hey, we need this oil production to basically stabilize pricing as best we can, because the more domestically that can be created, the better. Because right now at the Strait of Hormuz, you got a situation where, you've got oil tankers that haven't been going back and forth, and those takes weeks to get here. And the majority of California's oil comes from imports. And so you're going to have prices absolutely skyrocket. Trump is trying to offset that. And now California is fighting back with, lawsuits basically stating, oh, you can't do that. It's an environmental concern. California's off its rocker. Pipeline that coated Santa Barbara's beaches in crude oil 11 years ago is pumping again. And California is going to court to shut it down. You know what? This whole environmental thing, I wonder about the people that are driving 2 hours each way to work in Los Angeles. Are they concerned about a pipeline possibly leaking in the ocean and federal waters? Or are they concerned about how they're going to fill up their gas tank? You know what I mean? Just this virtue signaling. It's absolutely nutty. Attorney General Rob Bonta filed a lawsuit April 2026 against the U.S. Department of Energy, challenging a federal order that invokes the Defense Production Act. And we've been talking about that. We've been talking about executive orders that Trump has in front of them, some of them written up by folks that, we talk about a fair amount, because there's a situation where, the lack of ability to put jet planes in the air, especially on the West Coast, due to California's absolutely tanking the oil industry, is a matter of national concern. So through the Defense Production Act, to force the restart of an offshore oil pipeline idled since the 2015 Plains All-American spill near Refugio State Beach, 140,000 gallons of crude oil into the Pacific. Terrible. But you fix it, you clean it up, and you move on. You don't just absolutely starve out your state because that happens. Oil spills happen all the time, and it's terrible, and it's awful for the marine wildlife. But when you're in a situation where you've literally got, the West Coast defense on the line, you don't go, yeah, we really need a clean environment. And there's no guarantee that this thing's going to spill again. It's just business as usual, pumping out, thousands of barrels of oil a day. So right now, they got an order signed by Energy Secretary Chris Wright. Federal government directed Sable Offshore Corp., that's who owns this rig, and Pacific Pipeline that brings it in, to prioritize transporting hydrocarbons from the Santa Ynez unit through the Santa Ynez pipeline to Pentland Station. Oil is already flowing. And so California's like, oh, we can't have that. We can't have oil coming into California. We hate oil. We hate big oil. Federal officials moved ahead of the objections of state leaders, and the confrontation has become the sharpest test yet. Because you've got the feds versus state. And feds typically always rule, but it's going to take a battle in the court system, right? So the Fed opened this up based on the Pipeline Capacity Prioritization and Allocation Order, all right, under the Defense Production Act. And then, although the order does not name a specific war or theater of operations, leaving the factual basis for invoking the Defense Production Act emergency authority unclear, it's based on what if we did have a national emergency and all of our jets are grounded, because you've only got a week's worth of jet fuel because we're not domestically producing enough in California. And Arizona and Nevada pick a bunch of California's oil. So California is forced to import it. What if, like with the whole Iran thing, where you've got ships that take 3 or 4 weeks or sometimes 5-6 weeks to get here, what if those don't come and we've got some kind of insurgency thing happen? What if we have a domestic event in the shores of California? All the jets are grounded. That's the concern. And that is the basis for which this Defense Production Act, I believe, was placed out there. So California's legal counterattack, Bonta's lawsuit against the Department of Energy, argues the federal order unlawfully overrides state law. 2020 federal court order. That's what Newsom's talking about. 2020 federal court order. California has imposed binding conditions on the pipeline's future operation. They do not want it to go. California hates big oil. California is so environmentally sensitive. They have driven out, and in recent years, and we've covered this, they've driven out 2 of their last few refineries. They're down to like 7. And the 7 refineries that are left, the 3 companies that run them, have basically said, you guys are pricing us out of the market. We can't operate here. We're going to have to leave. And California will be forced to import all of its oil from places like Brazil and Iraq. And, from Houston through the Bahamas, through just this whole convoluted mess that doesn't need to happen, because oil is pumping right now off the shores of California. And California is suing to have that stopped. Make that make sense. Make that make sense. The whole thing is just doing what? Why? California's position is that those obligations were the product of negotiated settlements and judicial findings about safety risks, and that no executive branch directive can simply erase them. Well, we're about to find out, ladies and gentlemen, aren't we? Yeah. Because, Trump loves a good lawsuit. Yep. Let's go for it. He does not step down from a lawsuit. California, the whole West Coast, California, Oregon, Washington, we are continually suing the Trump administration. In fact, people make careers here in Washington state of suing Trump because, you're suing Trump. That must be the right call, right? And in this case, it's just flat out not. Governor Gavin Newsom sharpened the political argument in an official statement. Newsom noted that after 1 month of oil flowing through the restarted system, prices have only gone up. What a moron. He is basically, and if you're in California, he is basically hoping that you are as stupid as he thinks you are. Because prices are going up. Because all those oil tankers are out in the ocean and they've either been they've been idled, or they're stuck somewhere, or they haven't been able to get the fuel they need. They haven't been able to get through the Strait of Hormuz. It's a known quantity. So the fact that this pipeline is open is good, but it's not an overall game changer. It is necessary, but you're not going to drive prices down by opening this bad boy up. Not going to happen. But Newsom thinks that you're so stupid that you're going to, prices have only gone up. That's because you've got a global oil issue. And Newsom thinks you're so dumb, you won't figure that out. That claim, drawn from a 1-month price snapshot rather than a broader economic analysis, directly challenges the administration's argument the pipeline would lower energy costs. Well, it's a matter of supply and demand, isn't it? And you know what? It's also a matter of you should domestically be able to produce if it's there. And you know what's there in California? 1.8 billion barrels of oil in the earth. So how about we tap that? Oh, we can't because, environment. He fretted the defense protection order as a political favor to Sable Offshore. He framed political favor to Sable Offshore rather than a genuine wartime necessity, saying this restart does nothing for working families. Well, prohibiting its restart does less than nothing. It reduces the supply of oil to California, and that makes things more expensive. So the whole argument doesn't make sense. But you know what? Everybody's so green in California that they're going to go, oh, okay, California has also claimed trespass across state parkland where portions of the pipeline run. All right. Figure that out in court, right? Associated Press reporting confirms that oil is now moving through the system and that state regulators were sidelined in key restart decisions. Well, that's because the feds do what they want, and little state players, you guys got to sit this one out. And by sit this one out, I mean, basically take it and do what you can in court. That's the way this game is played, right? The legal question, no court has answered. Core dispute turns on a question that has no direct precedent. Can a Defense Production Act, which Trump has done, order override a standing federal consent decree and a federal court injunction? Question mark. We don't know the answer to that, but we're about to find out. Department of Energy relies on Justice Department Office of Legal Counsel opinion, arguing that when the president or a delegated cabinet secretary invokes the Defense Production Act to prioritize industrial activities, pumping oil out of the ground in federal waters, state measures that stand as an obstacle to those priorities must yield. All right. So the Department of Energy is going off that. California is going off, hey, there's all kinds of injunctions against you guys doing this. What are you doing? Let's go to court. I'll see you in court, right? California counters the consent decree and 2020 court order are not ordinary regulatory hurdles, but binding judicial rulings that an executive order cannot nullify. Well, maybe not. We'll find out in court, right? No court has ever ruled on this specific collision. Lawyers on both sides are drawing analogies to past TPA cases involving manufacturing supply chains, but none of those involved pipelines governed by environmental settlements. So this is kind of a one-of-a-kind deal. It's going to come down to what a judge says, right? Judge wakes up one day and goes to the gas station. Gas is $8.99 a gallon. Gets into court. He's just pissed off. He's got 3 alimony payments he's making. He's got 14 kids all going to college. And he's like, God darn it, gas was expensive this morning. Trump, you're right. Newsom, you're wrong. Pump, baby, pump. I'm just throwing that out there as kind of how some of this stuff goes. Because it really does come down to a judge and what a judge wakes up and goes, hey, I had my Cheerios this morning. I'm feeling good. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do. And they say it's based on the facts and, the data and the science. So much of what happens in court and business and law and the environment is just how a judge wakes up that day and he decides, and if somebody pisses him off, he's going to go the other direction. He's going to go, boom. That's what happens. Environmental and economic unknowns. The actual risk posed by restarting the pipeline is an open question. Yeah, what if it just continues fine? Get a bunch of oil? No harm to the environment? What about that? Oh, we can't risk it. Newsom's office has pointed to lingering tar balls and damaged habitats. Okay, but that's going to happen. That doesn't mean that you shut everything down, because that does happen. How about all the homeless encampments in California? How are those for the environment? Just asking for a friend. How about Los Angeles in general? How about the number of hypodermic needles on the ground in California right now? What about that? Maybe we should do something about that. Yeah, but that's not gonna reduce the cost of gas, is it? No, it's not. So our last section here is a coastline caught between wartime powers and spill memories. What is confirmed as of May 2026? Oil is flowing through the pipeline, verified by both corporate disclosures and independent reporting. It's going. Drill, baby, drill, except flow, baby, flow. DPA order exists and directs specific companies to act. Whether that order legally overrides state protections, court orders, and a federal consent decree is the central unresolved question. Which law will preside, right? What's it going to be? And it will be decided by judges, not press releases. That's why I went on that tirade about the judge with, multiple wives and alimonies or, whatever. He's just having a bad day and he gets into court and he goes, open it up. Keep it open. Remain it open. Or, it goes the other way. You don't know. The outcome will set a precedent that reaches well beyond one pipeline and one stretch of California coast. This thing will be in court forever. But you know what's really interesting is that, from the Fed standpoint, you just basically do what you want and you issue the order, and because it's federal, it overrides all the state stuff. So state always just gets crushed, right? Now, they do have a federal consent decree. All right. Okay. All right. But you've used wartime powers. You've used an act that I believe has great merit. We've talked with oil refinery controllers. We've talked with a assemblyman from California. We've read all kinds of reports from professors. And in my opinion, this should be reopened. This should be flowing oil. It should never have been closed down. But because California is so hell-bent on basically destroying the oil industry in California and really making things volatile for Californians, because there is no substitute for gas at this point in time. I mean, you got a little bit of solar. You got a little bit of electricity. You got a little bit of wind, but nothing that the economic engine of California needs. And I've talked about this before. Oil and gas production in California consists of 8% of their gross domestic product, right? But then the other 92% is based on having oil, because oil goes into everything. Got to have it. And when those prices go up, like California has the some of the most expensive gas in the country, Washington State, because of our Climate Commitment Act, California, because it loves to be a tree hugger, environmental, and Hawaii, because it's an island in the middle of the Pacific and you got to ship everything there, right? So 2 out of those 3 are completely self-induced. Doesn't have to be that expensive. In Washington State, literally right now, we have some of the highest gasoline we've ever had. And if you cross the border into Idaho, it's like $1.40 a gallon cheaper. So you can't tell me that it's the Iran war causing that. No, it's policy. And this is policy that Trump is trying to override, the federal government is trying to override, and I believe is in the country's best interest. And since I am still currently sitting here in the West Coast, I would like to have fighter jets be able to lift off and go do their thing versus, we're grounded. Didn't have any jet fuel. Ran out. Newsom sunk us. You don't really want that to happen. And that is, one of those things where you're like, God, if that actually happened, can you imagine what that would look like? Because some of the reports that we've read have talked about, okay, you're going to have, if the imports cease to come to California, big oil tankers billowing smoke come. If those cease to come to California, you've only got XYZ number of days of reserves, and those are being drawn down. And right now, those oil tankers are on their way, but they're weeks away from getting here. And in the meantime, you're going to have a massive spike. So whatever you can create domestically, like in California, the stuff that we're talking about, that needs to happen, in my opinion. All this California stuff, now it's virtue signaling. That's what it is. It's virtue signaling. We love the earth. We don't like the constituents of California because we're going to force them to pay a massively regressive tax in the form of the most expensive gasoline in the country. That's what we got going on. This one will be an interesting one to follow. Make sure you're subscribed, hit that notification bell. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.